Hey everybody, it's Kevin, it's Zane, and it's Chris, and all from RPH Ally. Chris, one of the newest members of RPH Ally. We're super excited to have him in the community. Today, we're going to talk about some more nerdy stuff like we always like to do on the Healthcare Tech Show, and this one kind of focus in the oncology space. I'm going to hit the reel to get us going, but the first big announcement, Chris is a brand new dad, so hit him up in the comments. Congratulate him, having a new baby on the way and being sleep deprived. Him joining us is a real blessing for us. So huge congratulations, buddy. And we'll talk about all about that in just a second. All right, guys. So the intro there to being a brand new dad, Chris. So I've got two little ones of my own, and I can think back to nights when I didn't know if I was awake or asleep or where I was because of how often the baby was getting up. And then I felt even worse for my wife because I thought, I'm not doing any of the other work that's necessary here, buddy. How's it going for you? How is the beautiful little one doing?
Oh, she's doing great. She's very active. Sometimes I feel like she's active at the wrong times, but that's okay. But yeah, we're just super blessed to have her, and super excited for her and watching her grow up in just this past week, and it's been really exciting, exhilarating, and I'll tell you it's life changing, right? So you really when your baby comes out and they're screaming, crying, things get really real fast. And I was leaving the hospital. We left in 2 days, and I asked the nurse. I said, "Are you sure you don't want us to stay for another day? I think we could use it." But no, they kicked us out. And everything's kind of learned on the fly. And as you guys know, like you're brand new. You don't know what you're doing, and you got a lot of responsibility on your hand, and you're just like, please just be okay, So
Amen. I remember praying, Chris, that I was like, Lord, just help me with like being a better father to educate my child, like to give them the lessons they need to learn. And then I ended up finding out that basically I was teaching nothing and I was the one learning everything. So I'm sure you're experiencing that from a fire hose right now, my friend, and I will I'll keep you in the prayers for that. So that's awesome. So speaking of, I guess, all the big changes in life and kind of things that just come at you and you have to learn on the fly. One thing that I experienced to segue into our episode today is we had some issues out at one of my hospitals that an oncology group was going to be leaving us because they weren't going to have to travel back and forth to the critical access hospital. And that was a big burden for the community that you guys both know and love, being oncology pharmacists. So I was trying to find ways to make sure we can keep services at the hospital. So back now over 10 years ago, we had a tele-oncology service that I created there, sent a nurse over for training so that she could be the eyes and ears of the physician team to be able to take care of a lot of the things that were necessary, not the infusions at that time, but a lot of the appointments. So the travel for that patient weren't as significant, overall, which was a big deal. Today, we were talking about like some safety things and what's going on in the oncology world and technology. And Chris was just educating Zane and I on what he's seeing kind of in the space overall. But I'd love to pass it off to you guys to say, like, what are the big market drivers in the space? What are people paying attention to when it comes to oncology and taking care of our patients in various care settings? Zane, I'll pass it off to you first on that, buddy. And then I'd love to hear Chris's thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, the market drivers are money. I'm kidding. Well, not really, but oncology is a huge money. It's one of the, if either it's top 2 or top revenue generating in a hospital system. The reason why a lot of things are being moved to home infusion, not home infusion, but ambulatory care, like ambulatory infusions, is because there's higher margins on that side. And then home infusion is like kind of it's more so it's being developed because a lot of these patients, it's hard for them to come for all their appointments, right? And so it's a convenience factor. That's kind of where home infusion kind of blossom from, because you get to capture more patients that way, right? If you're able to provide a service that'll come to their house, you're able to capture more patients. So which drives more revenue for the hospital system, right? So that's kind of why a lot of hospital systems, like Chris has mentioned earlier, they're creating their own home infusion branches, verticals, where they control everything in the process, right? From making the drug to delivering the drug, the people that are giving the drug, right? Because a lot of times prior to not too long ago, you're dealing with different companies, right? Somebody's making the drug somewhere else. You've got a staffing agency that's staffing the nursing staff. None of those systems really talk to each other, right? So you're really reliant on people being diligent with their note taking and diligent with everything. So things fell through the cracks quite a bit. Not because people wanted it to, it's just the nature of the system that is created. So that's one nice thing about it being all in house, where you control everything, is you have tighter controls over things, which ends up being safer for the patient, right? We don't have to worry about, what's, even with all the technology with remote checking and all that stuff, there's only so much you can do when you don't have control over it.
Mhm. Chris, what are your thoughts on the market drivers, buddy, and how we're kind of bridging some of those gaps between safety and maybe some convenience elements for patients that, to be frank, they need it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Zane, hit it right on the nail, right? So yeah, a lot of market drivers, right? You see a lot of new medications, a lot of new therapeutics coming to the oncology space. It's a huge space, very vast, and I think there's a lot of effort and research being poured into oncology to make it more like a chronic disease as much as possible, right? And get it a little, everybody's looking for the cure, but really being able to manage it for their patients, doing what's best for their patients and extending, patient survival and progression-free survival as well. So there's, lots of efforts going on there. For convenience factor, yeah, we're definitely seeing a lot of hospitals start up their own home infusion pharmacies, right? And as Zane said, a lot of that is because of that convenience factor for the patient. If you think about it, if a patient has to get infused in your hospital, and I'm certainly not an advocate with every drug being infused at home, so I want to make that very clear, right? There's some drugs that need to be closely monitored, but if it's home infusion appropriate, the time that they save is incredible, right? Going to the hospital, let's just say it's a quick 30 to 45 minutes away, not too bad, but you still got to get registered, right, and checked in. Then you may have to get your labs drawn. You got to wait for those labs to come back. Then the pharmacist has to verify those orders, and it gets sent to, the nurses have to do their assessments. Then they clear it to the pharmacist. Pharmacists check labs, check orders, check dose, check weight. It's cleared, right? Anything that they, perceive that they would need to intervene on, they can do there. But then they can compound the medication with the technicians compounding it, and then it gets back to the nursing infusion center. Then the nurse infuses it, right? Maybe it's 90 minutes, 2 hours, an hour, and depending on the regimen. And then there's a post monitoring, right? And so you're looking at half your day gone, 4 hours, right? Easy 4 hours, including drive time, sometimes a lot more. So you look at that convenience factor of being able to get it all at your house, administered right then and there. That's, you can do it with your loved one sitting right there. And, that's a huge convenience factor as well. And then it's good for the hospitals too to start their own home infusions, I believe, because it really makes those, all of your patients become in network, right? So you're not losing your patients per se in home infusion, but you're all keeping them in network. And as Zane said, that transition of the transition of care, the continuity of care is just so much more seamless, right? Everybody's sharing the same EMR. They're documenting notes. Everybody can see, what the notes are, what the assessments are, what's going on with the patient. It's just easier to track a patient's, progression, their disease progression, or their disease as well from beginning to end when it's all within one kind of healthcare system. And so, yeah, big things there. And then lastly, I think Zane mentioned remote compounding. That's something that we're really seeing a lot of in home infusion, and where we typically saw it in ambulatory infusions in hospitals, right? There's several different products out there that have that remote verification, scan ability. So it used to be just syringe pullbacks, and now it's remote verification. You've got pictures, you've got all sorts of things that you can measure it by, so that helps the pharmacist and really helps create patient safety. So,
I think. Go ahead, Zane.
Yeah, no, and I was going to say that, also on the infusion side, in terms of just connectors, there's been a lot of work being done. So there's like what they call closed system devices from like the compounding side. Then also when you get to the patient side, there's not a lot of screwing. You're just literally attaching two things together. So you have far less chances of leaks and stuff that are happening. So, like when you're at the patient's house, you're not, there's also that too, right? We're using things that are very safe for this environment. It's closed. It's everything is closed. There should be no interaction with the chemotherapy medication at all. And then also another thing is another reason why things are moving to home infusion. And Chris kind of touched on it. Certain medications you just can't, right? Because such a high risk of infusion reactions or just some other kind of things going on. You need to be closely monitored. But now with all these quote unquote biologics that are coming out, more targeted therapies, they're much more they're much easily tolerated at home. And so that's kind of pushing it a little bit as well. And then the other thing, like Chris mentioned as well, is just time, not wasted time, but it's just, just waiting in the waiting room. I think a lot of people don't realize this. Waiting in the waiting room as a cancer patient with high risk of infections, everyone around you is sick to a certain degree, and you're in that room for maybe an hour, 2 hours, right? That's just a recipe for not disaster, but you can have hospital acquired infections being as good as you are just being in a room with other sick people. So those are things that are being mitigated by home infusion as well. Outside of the convenience factor and such, I think there's just so many things that go into a treatment that people don't realize that home infusion solve quite a bit of them.
Yeah, Zane, I definitely that was a great point that you make, right? Looking at all the kind of possibilities of infections by going to a hospital, right? No matter how good those cleaning procedures are, if you're going to the hospital, you're going on the elevator, right? Or you're going to this high populated area where people are in and out, and they're going because they're sick, right? They're not going to visit the hospital for fun usually, right? They're going for a reason. Yeah, that's a great point to mention as well. And yeah, I can just echo that. That was a really, really good point.
None of you guys went to the hospital for the food? No?
There's a couple things that aren't too bad there, Zane. But no, I think the other piece is you guys mentioned about the convenience factors on one side, and having it done in the home, and then trying to have closed, low contamination systems to be able to necessitate there. The opposite side, kind of a negative element, is just the infection risk that could happen. I think one thing that maybe needed to be underscored a little bit is the psychological strain that it has on an individual to have to rely on family to take them to that trip. They have to go through all the additional burden that they already have a mental health element that is in play with any oncology service, that now you're compounding that with having them go into a system that maybe doesn't cater toward all of their mental health needs as well. They're just trying to get the things done in the order that they need. And like Chris said, then half the individual's day is gone, and it's not a necessarily pleasant experience for them. And so I think those are all super important. Saying all those things, what are the technology elements that you guys are seeing going into play to help with some of those factors? Like the things that I'm thinking of when I thought about the episode today, everything that I'm seeing in AI and algorithm based learning to help with drug development. Like that's what you see and you hear in the news all the time, that we're going to come up with new therapies faster because we're able to analyze something based on its chemical structure or breakdown, and then potentially escalate a drug trial, because of that, new development. What outside of that though, guys, that maybe other folks don't know about is happening in the oncology space, that technology is really starting to play a role in?
Yeah, I mean, kind of going the drug development route, there's a huge push in just route of administration to sub-Q injections. So there's a bunch of drugs that are coming out. They're just being sub-Q, and I wouldn't be surprised because a lot of these are biologic agents, so not technically chemotherapy, but still shouldn't just be handling them randomly. But I wouldn't be surprised if eventually we get to pre-filled syringes, and it ends up being kind of a Lovenox type thing where you go to the pharmacy, pick it up once a week, once a month, whatever, give yourself the injection, or they give you the injection right then and there, and then you go on with your life, go on with your day. There's also other things about vaccines, anti-cancer vaccines that are being developed, where you get just a general dosing regimen, like once a month for 3 months or whatever, and then you should be good to go. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things happening with just routes of administration and what kind of things are being done. CAR T has been around for a little bit, but now it's really taking hold. So I mean, that what that technology is, it's pretty amazing stuff. I mean, that is starting to get pushed to outpatient procedures, and I wouldn't be surprised that within the next 5 to 10 years, it's a home infusion type thing as well.
Yeah, formulations are definitely a huge driver, right? I think it's Like we talked about convenience with infusions, it's even better with sub-Q injections, oral medications, right, when possible. So definitely see a lot of advances in formulations. Definitely see a lot more therapeutics as well as the oncology clinical trial space keeps changing a little bit, right? There's certain stories that you hear, things that you read that they're looking at different creative ways to make that trial, right? So it's not such a huge, long phase 3 trial, and to get that into the hands of people a little bit quicker, hands of the patients a little bit quicker, right? And yeah, let's just talk about how many new drugs come into the oncology space, like those NCCN guidelines, all the cancer oncology guidelines, everybody taking BCOP. Certainly feel for you guys because it changes all the time. There's so many guideline changes, so many drugs that come out every single quarter. I mean, it must be pretty intense to keep up with all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you think about a digital world too. And that's where I think, there's a lot of technology play here for oncology and healthcare in general. It's like digital communications, right? So, I've seen some things where patients can actually talk and video chat with a nurse, right? In oncology, right? So they can ask those questions and set up kind of appointment times that way. Communicating with your prescriber or your oncologist via, a text or a patient portal is really big, where, you used to just have to call, right? And then you're kind of at the mercy of sitting by your phone, waiting for the physician to call back, your oncologist to call back. You got a lot more communication tools, a lot more educational tools now available for the patients. And I think that's a huge, huge plus with healthcare technology evolving.
Huge. With communications kind of leading us off into this for conversation wise, the two spaces that I'm really curious on your guys' thoughts here are, one, like advanced detection. So not just detection of like, is there a progression of your cancer, but also detection of side effect profiles, those kinds of things that we're seeing technology start to be able to play a role in taking care of patients to make sure that we are avoiding some of those issues that we can potentially avoid when using these oncology agents. Any thoughts on that side? And the second part of the question, if you want to answer it instead, is, are you seeing anything in the DTX realm, anything in the digital therapeutic world that you're seeing applications or other things go into play that are now assisting patients to take care of all of their other needs outside of just the infusion of drugs?
Yeah. I mean, to your first point, man, I just lost my train of thought.
Come on, Barry.
Huh?
I said, come on, Barry White.
Yeah, man. What was the question? The first part of the question again? I'm sorry.
The first part of the question is the detection element.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. So no, it's been happening for a long time. So where I worked, I was fortunate enough to work at an academic institution, and we were doing genetic testing for, oh my God, I don't even know. Almost, it's been maybe now like 9+ years now, and it was amazing because it would tell you like we were starting to see medications being used for diseases that they were never used for, just mainly because they showed the biomarkers for, like for example Herceptin, HER2, right? And for colon cancer, people that had HER2, they added it onto the regimen. They found good results from that, right? And then also there's a lot of great things being done in terms of side effect profile. So if you are showing a certain gene, you shouldn't be getting this X, Y, and Z drug, right? So that in itself is great too, right? So you're helping the patient. You're kind of skipping a step, right? Rather than trying the drug, having them miserably fail, feeling miserable throughout the process. We're just skipping that part and just going to something that will work better for them, right? So that is a huge thing in oncology. Gene therapy, I think eventually it's going to get to a point where go in for cancer treatment. They get they figure out what genes you have, what cancer genes you have, and they create just a specific cocktail for you. And then you get that specifically made for yourself. And I think that's eventually where oncology is going to get to. In terms of DTX, I don't really know too much out there in terms of DTX realm, so I can't really speak to it. But there are definitely areas where DTX can definitely help. But right now, I think DTX is just one of those areas right now, which I think if they're still DTX is still trying to find its footing in digital health. There's been a lot of big companies that have kind of faltered. And I think that's really hurt the space quite a little bit. So we'll see what's there, what comes. But I think there's definitely some room for it. But I don't know if it's like hitting me in the face right now.
Got it. Chris, what about you, buddy?
Yeah, like Zane said, right, pharmacogenetics, that's a huge driver in the oncology world, right? Like side effect profiling, UGT1A1 testing, right? So you have not only patients that you want to get genetic testing to see maybe if there's an algorithm or a certain pathway that they can get treated with, right? And on oncology medications, and kind of see what, risk of side effects they're at for certain medications. But also you have to do it for treating as well, right? So you got the PDL1 expressions that they test for and all those sorts of things. So you can get Keytruda or any kind of those Opdivo, sorry, drawing a blank, a little tired here, but you've got a lot of those pathways to go through. And I think certainly there is a lot of cancer institutions starting to incorporate pharmacogenetics into their pathways, right? Clinical pathways. And I think that's a huge thing that I hear about a lot. I know the hospital I worked at, talked to a couple of friends recently. There's a big driver and big push for these clinical pathways and updating these pathways, right? And just to help physicians make better decisions and have more support on decisions. So that's going to be a big role there. Digital therapeutics, kind of here with Zane too. I don't really know a whole lot of in-depth on digital therapeutics, and especially in the oncology world. I can't really say too much on it just because I'm, kind of on the outskirts, don't know exactly how it's going to interlay with it. Certainly heard a few tidbits here and there, but oncology is an ever evolving space, and as things progress, I'm sure that's going to take place as well.
Interesting. So, with that being kind of said, that's kind of on the fringes. Do you feel like when it comes to the pharmacy world, like playing a larger role inside of oncology and technology, what things like your guys' roles are rather unique, both having product management elements in some really interesting companies doing interesting things inside of those spaces. When it comes to the pharmacy world, getting more in tune, maybe not, taking on similar roles to you guys, but becoming better at recognizing technology is going to change the way that we're operating in the oncology world. How would you recommend that they stay updated with everything? I mean, of course, join Zane and Chris on our PHL and have a conversation with them is the best way. But other than that, like, what are the other ways to stay kind of updated on what's happening in the field?
Pray, because there's a new medication coming out every like 5 seconds. No. I mean, yeah, definitely pray and hope to God that. No, but I mean, I think the biggest thing is just what I used to do is I just set up like a journal watch for oncology. So I'd get an email here and there for like, things that are coming out. Obviously working in the field and being fortunate to work at an academic institution. Every time a new drug came out, I found out within like a couple of days because somebody was trying to order it. So I was forced to, it was kind of nice in the sense that I was, once I get the drug, I was looking it up all that time. But I think the biggest thing is just finding a process that works best for you, whether it be like once a month, reading an article or whatever, going through the FDA list, whatever it happens to be, and just looking up to it, because I don't think there's one thing that'll work for everyone. And it is one of the biggest struggles in oncology. One of the reasons why I love oncology is the constant change that occurs, because nothing's ever the same. But also I can see why people are really scared of it, because there's just so much change happening all the time, and you really need to be abreast of all of it. So whatever happens to be, you scan the NCCN guidelines for whatever topic you are, or set up some sort of thing for journal watch, whatever you find easiest. That's what I would do. I don't know if there's one size fits all. I mean, maybe Chris has something better that I don't. Like I said, I was just lucky enough to be working in an area where, everyone was trying the brand new thing. So I was forced to learn it right away.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a pill that comes out, right? The next therapy that needs to come out is like a knowledge pill for oncology, right? So helping pharmacists, physicians out, nurses out. Now, I think it's very hard to stay on top of everything in oncology, right? It's way too vast. There's too many different types of cancers, segments of cancers. I think one of the best things you can probably do is pick a couple of your favorite cancers or things that you treat the most, right? And scan through those NCCN guidelines and other guidelines, ASCO guidelines that you might use. Recognize what's different, what's changed, and why that's changed, right? Like what trials, what landmark trials led to that change from first line or second line, third line, so forth, right? Easier said than done, right? Because you got to find a time for it. One of the best things I think I did going, throughout my oncology pharmacy career, I attended a lot of drug dinners. Not only did I get the food, which was always excellent, but you really got a wealth of information, right? And they have to go by the FDA trials, and you can evaluate everything pretty fairly, right, in your own head, and but it's good just to have that constant kind of learnings, right? And not only that, we always had PGY2 oncology residents, that would do some presentations, and you want to attend those as well because take learnings away from everything that you go to, right? And that's a probably, I think, the most practical ways to go, right? You're always going to get invited to drug dinners, and you'll always have presentations in oncology. As far as technology advances and like what's coming to oncology in the market, especially from a product healthcare tech world, that's even in my mind, that's a really cool thing as well. And I'll be honest, how I see a lot of that is through LinkedIn. I have my network has a lot of people in oncology in the healthcare tech space. Zane can attest to that too. We're in a group, right? And so you see a lot of the postings of what's coming from different companies and what kind of outcomes and impact that's going to have to the oncology community.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you on there. Like I said, oncology has a lot of money behind it. So there's just because of that reason, there's a lot of companies attacking that space. And I think that predictive analytics, the prediction, like going to the AI ML side, the predictive analytics portion of it is going to be a big thing that's going to come up. Not like now, but sorry. Sorry.
That was a good one. That was like a cough sneeze combo.
Yeah. But yeah, as I think predictive analytics is going to be a big thing, like seeing like, taking all the information, what the patient is, age, gender, whatever, all that, and seeing like the probability of this drug working, that drug working. I think that's coming down the pipeline sooner than we think. And then just analytics in general, right? I think that's one big thing in cancer, outside of more things, is just seeing how prevalent certain things are, certain disease states, or certain, like that. Cancer is really out of the majority. I mean, most healthcare is driven by this, but oncology specifically is really driven by like numbers and what's working, what's not working, and then really, like, I think that's going to be like where it's going. Shameless plug. That's kind of not that. I'm building an analytics platform for our company, so maybe that's just me with my own blinders on. But I do think that predictive analytics is going to be a big part of the future of oncology.
I love what you guys both touched on. One of my best friends from college is an oncology pharmacist for the Mayo in Phoenix. And so when him and I were visiting just recently, he said, Kevin, it's literally I'm operating on the fringes all the time and trying to stay up on the latest and greatest of everything to keep my patients safe. Like I'm always trying to make sure I don't kill anybody, right? That's always in the back of your mind. And some of the things that he's always telling me about is just keeping his finger on the pulse of his patients. And I think that's where the technology elements are really going to play an interesting role in, is how do we track how an individual is doing when sometimes they don't even know how they're doing. Yeah. And so using some of these biometrics and some of the other analytic tools that are out there to be able to make sure we're staying where the patients need to be, and then accumulating that data to be able to tell us what treatments are doing for different patients, as you guys have both alluded to, in some personalized medicine fashions, is a really interesting space that I can see everything going. And when it comes to like staying updated with things, you guys are a valuable source of that. So I think make sure you guys are connecting with people like Zane and Chris on LinkedIn, RPH Ally, everything else, to ask them questions and see what they're kind of doing in their given careers. I'm going to start with Chris on this one. Chris, anything for the audience to kind of take away from this episode, or other things you'd like them to be able to look into, a little bit further, so they can be those individuals inside of the oncology space that are helping out their institutions? Because one thing Eric did tell me, he said, Kevin, there is a shortage of oncology pharmacists. Like, getting into oncology and being able to help me at the Mayo is something he said that we need. Like, we need more well-trained oncology pharmacists to come into the space. So I feel like when folks are looking for job opportunities, students, current pharmacists looking to transition, residents, the need is out there. How do you stay on top of that need, Chris? And then how do you find where you're going to go and position yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if you're looking into oncology, right, you're a pharmacist, let's say you don't have that traditional PGY2 oncology experience, right? You know, there's a lot of institutions out there that need oncology pharmacists, and it may not be that heavy clinical side first. It may be a compounding check pharmacist, right? And that's your way to get in the door, right? You're verifying those drugs, you're verifying medications. But what does that allow you to do? It allows you to recognize oncology medications, right? It allows you to see, why is this patient on, you know, Herceptin, trastuzumab? Why are they on that? And it allows you to do that research. It allows you to learn a little bit more. And then once you get your foot in the door, I mean, everything opens up, right? I mean, you show your value there. And then all of a sudden, those oncology clinical positions that do come up, you know, whether it's an infusion suite or, you know, working alongside with a physician, you know, they know who you are, they know what value you provide. And you just learn more and more from there, and you kind of leverage your network in that sense. And I think that's probably one of the best and easiest ways to kind of get in the oncology space. There's just, you know, I live in Metro Atlanta, so there's a ton of oncology practices here that really, you know, need oncology pharmacists. And I worked at one a couple years ago, and I'll be honest, you know, they took me right out of home infusion, right? So it wasn't like I had this tremendous oncology background experience. And I've seen a lot of retail pharmacists as well be able to transition really nicely. As long as you're willing to learn it and you show that aptitude that you can do it, you know, there's going to be a room in place for you, right? And maybe it starts as PRN, maybe it starts as the PRN verification pharmacist there, but it's all about what you make out of it. So
Awesome.
I hope that answers your question.
That was fantastic. Zane, any final thoughts on that, buddy?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't have a PGY2 in oncology. I was just a PGY1, just interested in oncology. And I think Chris hit it on the head. You just need to have a willingness to learn, because oncology is one of those, I mean, there's a lot of places in medicine like that, but in oncology specifically, you have to really be a lifelong learner to succeed. As long as you're a lifelong learner, and you'll be fine. I think most of these places, especially like, you know, especially if there's other pharmacists that you can kind of mentor you. Most of the oncology community is very open and really helpful throughout your career, as you'll make more connections. Many times I've like texted not random, but people I know, like, hey, have you guys ever seen this, or emailed them. And you know, it's a pretty tight knit community that's, you know, it's always going to be helpful to you. So you're never going to be alone by yourself. You might be physically alone sometimes, but never like truly alone. So yeah, and then also just apply, you know, if you're interested in oncology. I think a lot of people think that they can't do it. I think Chris and I are both showing you that. I mean, neither of us are in the oncology clinical side, but you know, when I got in, I, you know, was on the infusion side, but then I had a willingness to go to the clinical side. So they put me there, and, you know, I did clinical side. I did 50% of my time was spent in clinical side. The other 50% of my time was spent in the outpatient infusion. And both things helped me quite a bit, right? And the infusion side helped me recognize drugs and what they are, names, and, you know, dosages and everything, which helped me on the clinical side. So like he said, you know, sometimes just get in just to recognize the drug names and what the common doses are. And trust me, the other thing with oncology is no one expects you to know everything off the top of your head. And this is one thing that, you know, kind of answering your initial question, what are some things to stay on top of it? I think the number one thing is just knowing where to find the information quickly and accurately. So just developing a system, getting things going. Like every time I logged into a computer, I had LexiComp and, you know, UpToDate open all the time on my second screen. And, you know, I was able to like quickly, you know, if somebody asked me a question, 90% of the times I had no idea, because I'm not the smartest kid in the world. But I was able to look it up and get my answer quickly to them. And that's really all that matters, right? You don't need to know no one in. There are some people that are amazing. You know, I worked with somebody who had like a photographic memory. You'd ask her a question and she'd boom give you an answer, but that's like 0.01% of the population. Most of us are struggling outside of our, you know, our lanes that we're really familiar with. Everything else, you know, we have to look up. So don't feel bad, apply. And honestly, I love oncology. I think, you know, it's one of the best areas in medicine personally. But yeah, that's what I would say.
No, that's fantastic. I think really inspiring to hear you guys kind of go over some of those things. I want to make sure that we get Chris back with his beautiful family and that beautiful little girl of his. Thank you, Chris, so much for joining us today, buddy. Reminder to everybody, you can head over to rphally.com. You can join us there. Make sure you have your license and everything ready. You can ask Zane and Chris any questions that you have inside of the tech channel there, and then reach us all on Digital Thoughts for Zane. LinkedIn for Chris as well, but we sure look forward to future conversations in the oncology space and outwards for Healthcare Tech Show. Everybody have a wonderful rest of the day, and we'll talk soon.
Bye. Thanks for having me, guys. Good to see y'all.